Captain Marvel is easily the most divisive film in the entirety of the MCU's over 30-movie span, and is also considered one of the most divisive superhero films ever. But with the recent release of its sequel, The Marvels, I thought I'd answer this question once and for all. Is Captain Marvel really that bad? I've seen people claim this movie to be one of the worst Marvel films ever made, one of the worst superhero films ever made, or you get the people that claim it's one of the worst movies ever made because those are the same kind of people that say any bad movie they watch is one of the worst movies ever made because they don't watch movies. And the reception upon release was, like I said, very divisive. Critics seemed to like it fine with a 79% tomato meter score, but the audience's was a very different story, sitting at 45% at the time of this recording. And this is where the backstory of this gets a little interesting, because this was around the time where people started accusing Rotten Tomatoes of being paid off by studios. Now, this has been confirmed that it's happened a few times, but it's never been confirmed that Disney's done it. And all these accusations started with Star Wars The Last Jedi, which was released around 15 months before the release of Captain Marvel. That movie, which ironically, if you look at Captain Marvel on Rotten Tomatoes, the first thing that shows up on You Might Also Like is Star Wars The Last Jedi, which has a 91% tomato meter score and a 42% audience score. Just for the record, other movies that are included on You Might Also Like with Captain Marvel include Suicide Squad and The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2, and The Lone Ranger. Not exactly the most high quality of films, huh? The other one on here is Star Trek Beyond, which is fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with that movie. But that didn't tell the full story. The movie may not have been the most well-received by people, but people still showed up to the movie anyway, making $426 million, almost $427 million domestically, over $700 million internationally, and grossing about $1.1 billion worldwide, and making another $67.5 million in home video sales. And the ironic thing is that one of the reasons why this movie got so much bad press was because of dumb shit that Brie Larson said ahead of the movie's release. We all know the infamous quote of, "I don't need white men to tell me what they think of this movie." Well, ironically, I think it was around 67% of the audience who went to see this movie were men. So apparently her words did not discourage them from seeing the movie, but apparently she does need men to tell her what they think of the movie, otherwise the movie would not have been very successful. And that's been shown in the box office results for the second movie, as it had a worse opening weekend than The Flash, which is pretty bad. Although I will say it's still done better than DC's two other releases, Shazam! Fury of the Gods and Blue Beetle, almost doubling their opening weekend profits. But let's get to the actual movie. And like I said, is this movie really that bad? I'm not here to talk about what if everybody else wonders if it's that bad. I'm here to talk about if I think the movie is this bad, because I never did a review on this movie because it came out a year before I started doing them. So I've never really talked about this movie that much, and I said in my video about the Marvels that I did about a week ago that I'd be talking about it here. And is the movie really that bad? Well, let's get into the pros and cons of this movie. This isn't going to be like a review where I just talk about everything. I want to talk about the pros and cons of this movie. The pros are the majority of the supporting cast. Nick Fury and a cameo by Greg Clark as Agent Coulson were both very welcome additions. Maria Rambeau was a pretty decent character, and Jude Law made for a decent villain even if his character wasn't very strongly written, but we'll get back to that. The visual effects look incredibly impressive, and this was back before $200 million movies looked like shit. This is back when you had a budget of $200 million and that showed on screen. And something else I want to bring up is that people seem to forget that 2019 was a really bad year for comic book movies. Sure, we had Avengers Endgame, which was fantastic, and we had Shazam, which was pretty good. And then we had this, and what else did we get? Well, we also got Spider-Man Far From Home, and even though that was very well received, and also made over $1 billion, I personally consider it the weakest film in the entirety of the MCU's catalog, and one of the worst Spider-Man films. Men in Black International, which has been largely forgotten by the mass majority of the public, Dark Phoenix, which most people consider to be a fever dream that didn't actually happen, and DC didn't have any other movie. They had Joker, which, again, was well received, but I sure as hell don't understand why. And I think that was it. Oh, wait, no, there was the forgotten Hellboy remake, too. Yeah, not exactly the strongest year for comic book films, was it? This one kind of sat in the middle. But, well, again, we'll get back to that. I'll talk about more of the story. Amnesia is one of the main players of this film, and I usually consider that one of the laziest plot devices ever created. I mean, especially in movies like Spider-Man 3, where they used it to have Harry around, but to have him not be the villain for about an hour of the movie. First, I guess to drive a wedge between him and MJ, even though it wasn't well written, even in the slightest, but I've already talked about Spider-Man 3. I did an entire video on that. But here, I think it's done well enough because it plays into the story. The character she doesn't really know who she is. All she knows is the Kree. All she knows is this essentially genocidal race that wants to destroy the Skrulls because they believe them to be a danger. However, she never really understands why. It's because it's all she knows. It's similar to Zuko and Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where all they know is their father's warmongering ways, so that's how they're raised. Especially when it came to Azula, she was hell-bent on taking over the Fire Nation, becoming the new Fire Lord, and bringing every other realm to its knees. Because that's all she knows. That's what she was taught. Here, it's very similar with Jude Law's character and whose name I can't be bothered to remember because he's a very forgettable villain. But again, we'll get back to that. The action sequences are pretty fun. For the most part, there's a pretty shitty fight scene between her and one of the other Kree members involving one point where one of them shoots the other one with a Nerf gun. And considering that won Best Fight at the MTV Movie Awards instead of Captain America vs. Thanos in Avengers Endgame, really shows how much of a joke the MTV Movie Awards are. Hell, in 2010, they had a cat fight between two actresses in a movie win Best Fight over Percy vs. Luke from The Lightning Thief. So that tells you all you need to know about their standards. They don't give a shit about actual good, anything. It's MTV. What do you expect? But all the other action sequences are pretty fun. Easily the best character in the movie is Goose the Flurkin, and the reveal of his, big tentacle mouth thing where he can swallow other people is probably one of the funniest bits in modern MCU. But there are problems with this movie, and one is obviously Brie Larson's acting. She's not a good actress. I don't understand why she was cast in this role. She's never been a good actress. I've seen her in other stuff, and she's not any better. I don't understand why Marvel wanted her in this role. Not to mention that she's a giant, annoying feminist that can't keep her fucking mouth shut. And I hope she's out, and apparently she's already grown tired of the character. I hope Marvel recasts her. I want her gone. Everybody else does too. I don't really think I've seen anybody that legitimately likes Brie Larson, let alone as Captain Marvel, because I like this franchise and I don't like her presence in it. She automatically makes it worse. It was similar to Fast X. The movie was already bad, but her presence alone made the movie so much worse. And then there's the villain played by Jude Law. Now, like I said, Jude Law's performance is really good, because Jude Law is obviously a great actor. He's not going to give a bad performance unless he attempts to. But the character is so boring. We don't really understand his motivations. I don't think we ever understand why they're trying to eliminate the Skrulls. I think they say something about, they invaded the Kree's world because they were trying to inhabit it, and they mistook that as an invasion rather than, migration. But, again, if they're illegal immigrants, I can understand why them wanting to drive them out. And that's another thing, is that both sides are wrong. The Kree are obviously painted as the villains, but the simple fact that they saw the Skrulls trying to invade their land, and all they did was drive them away and want to keep them away and want to keep them from destroying any other worlds like they thought they were trying to do to theirs, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. They're misguided, but that's the entire point. They're just misguided. They're not villains. And I will say the cameo by Ronan the Accuser was kind of cool, but it was kind of pointless too. And then my least favorite aspect of this movie is that Carol Danvers has no character and has no character arc. Her entire arc in this movie is ironically very similar to a movie that would come out the next year in Disney's shitty live-action Mulan remake, where her character arc is her discovering that she shouldn't hold back and that she's perfect the way she is. That she's 100% perfect and that all these other people are trying to hold her back. That's her character arc throughout this movie, and I don't care for it. It becomes a very anticlimactic ending where she just straight up tells Marvel to just fuck off, which would have been an interesting scene if it wasn't just highlighting the fact that, oh yes, I'm a perfect Mary Sue, and there's nothing you fuckwads can do about it. That's not interesting. Again, it was the same thing with that Mulan remake. All she learns is that, oh, I'm perfect, and all these people are telling me to hide my powers, trying to hold me back. That's not interesting, that's lazy, and I think it was done on purpose. It's the Mary Sue effect. The same thing happened with Rey, and like I said, with Mulan, and keeps happening in Hollywood. It happened with Wendy in Peter Pan and Wendy. It happened with Ariel in Little Mermaid. It keeps fucking happening. Or it happened with the feminist chick from Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It keeps happening, and ironically, it keeps happening with Disney because they don't learn their fucking lesson. Okay, I'm getting off topic. I've already done a video on that. I've done several videos on that. I need to move on. And that's the basic plot that's the basics of this movie. I know there's a lot more detail I could go into, but I'm assuming you've seen the movie if you're watching this video. If you're watching this video, you're probably a Marvel fan. You've probably seen the movie. You've probably made your own opinion on it. My opinion, is this movie really that bad? No, it's not. It's not a terrible movie. It's very mediocre. It is on the bottom tier of the MCU. It's down there with Spider-Man Far From Home, Incredible Hulk, Thor 2, and Iron Man 2. It is down there in terms of the MCU. It's fighting for last place. But honestly, it's not a terrible movie. Again, the only movie I think in the MCU that is absolutely terrible is probably Incredible Hulk and Spider-Man Far From Home. Maybe Iron Man 2. I watched that recently and I did not enjoy myself in the slightest. But again, it's fighting for last place. But again, the movie's results do not lie. Critics liked it, audiences were pretty split on it, and it made a shitload of cash. But that did not translate to the sequel. I'm seeing the sequel pretty much right after I'm done editing this. I'll have this edited, and then I'm probably going to go see the movie, so I may have a review up tonight or tomorrow morning. It'll be one or the other. But yeah, so if I were to give this a score like I do for my other reviews, it would probably be C- range, C minus range, because it's not a bad movie. I can watch it fine, but I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that it's a great comic book movie and it's such an underrated film. I'm not gonna do that. This isn't an Amazing Spider-Man. This isn't a Rise of the Guardians. This isn't a Maze Runner. This isn't a Percy Jackson. This isn't some underrated film that people give a lot of shit for. This is a perfectly average superhero movie. Nothing more, nothing less. So that's all I got. Let me know what you think of Captain Marvel down in the comments, and I will see you all next time. Bye.